Hi everyone, welcome back to Lifting the Lamp and welcome to part 2 of my account of completing the 49-day Gebofal ritual. For part 1 and some all-important context, please check the link in the description below. In my last video I discussed a bit of the background of the Annunakian system, the role that the Gebofal ritual plays within that, and my own efforts to reconstruct the Gebofal ritual and also to time the ritual at a time that was significant. So I began the Gebofal ritual on the 16th of December 2014 and I finished the Gebofal ritual on the 2nd of February 2015. And I've got detailed records from the entire 49-day ritual. I did it in a number of locations. Often, like Dee and Kelly, I would just do it from a room that I had dedicated to the work in my own home. Other times I took my Annunakian tools into more remote locations, far away from the city and closer to the wilderness. And there are a lot of really sparse open spaces in Western Australia to choose from, which I had the benefit of. And those were some of the locations that I chose for certain calls during the 49-day Gebofal ritual. But more important than the location was the internal result that I was able to get. So each time I would read a call, I would go into a scrying session, and then I would try and receive visions or communications, and I received both. I found myself in the inner world of my imagination, transported to incredible alien landscapes. There were a lot of landscapes which looked very barren, almost like being in a rocky wilderness. And as I ascended further up through the higher ethers, I found that the visions got even stranger and more abstract, and I would find myself in a vision that was like floating in the cosmos and seeing stars and nebulae all around. And as I ascended higher still, I found that there were realms that were beyond the description of anything like what exists in the physical world. They were just realms of flying colour. The closest thing that I've seen that can describe it is like at the end of 2001: A Space Odyssey, or perhaps like in the new Oppenheimer movie. What Oppenheimer is imagining when he thinks about all of the energy vibrating in the universe, it was kind of like that, but all realms that were very different to our own. And in these environments I had visions of particular entities, Annunakian angels. And again, these angels, these entities, looked unlike anything that can be described in everyday life on planet Earth. Many of them were simply elaborate shapes with wings. Some of them simply appeared as like a flowing garment or piece of fabric. Others appeared with geometric shapes for heads, like a triangle or a diamond. And some of them just looked like creatures from another planet. Not what you would expect from all of the medieval images that we have. Perhaps closer to something like what Ezekiel saw. And perhaps I'll do some shorts just sharing some of the really bizarre ways that these angels appeared, because trying to describe them with words only gets me so far. And these angels that I encountered gave me communications. I would get thoughts in my head, words coming into my head, as though I was thinking them, but they were not from me. And I recorded those words diligently. They told me a great many things about the mysteries of the universe, about the spiritual path, also some very ominous warnings about the destruction that would befall the human race if we continue to live in the way that we are. And there were messages too about the potential for there to be a coming spiritual revival of the human race. Unfortunately, I can't share all of the messages that the angels gave me right now. I was given strict instructions to keep the words sealed for a time. And I was given instructions later in subsequent Enochian workings as to when I can reveal that material. It's not quite yet. It may be a few years still. A few more things need to fall into place before I can publish those communications. For one thing, I need to complete a commentary for the more kind of odd and cryptic sounding communications that I got, so that people can grasp them. But the timing needs to be right in terms of how many people can bear witness to the revealing of that knowledge. So one thing that you can do to hasten that is to promote my channel to other people and help me to build my subscriber base more quickly, because that, more than anything else right now, will determine how early I can reveal the communications of the Enochian angels. Although I was told to keep the communications sealed until the appointed time, there are a few things that I can share, which I will share to demonstrate how uncanny many of these revelations were, in terms of giving me knowledge that I was unaware of, which seems to fit into a objective framework. So for example, when I was doing the call of the 30th ether and the 29th ether, I had received visions for both of those before in my very earliest experiments with Enochian magic in about 2008 or 2009. The angels told me at one point, to just insert material from those prior communications into the new one that they were giving me then. And then they proceeded to continue to give me knowledge from that particular ether. And when it came time for me to put the two together, it was incredible. It was like getting a page from a book and putting the missing page in the book and reading it, and it was like a seamless narrative. Another thing happened years later, which really made me realize just how profound the process of revelation was that I had undertaken in the Gebofal ritual. I was reading the Quran, and I read a verse in the Quran which seems to paraphrase exactly, or at least very closely, a similar verse that I received from the angels during the Gebofal ritual, even though I had never read that surah in the Quran before. The passage in question was comparing God to lightning flashing on a dark night, and that being related to how one can navigate through the darkness. And of course, the Quran makes the claim that it too was a text which was dictated by an angel, and it makes the claim that it was intended as a restoration of previous holy books, which are all meant to be conveying the same truth, the same message. So I took that as a very significant sign that the revelations that I had received in the Gebofal ritual were authentic. Another thing that happened was in one of the communications that the angels gave me, they were describing a certain way that the four elements and spirit interact, and they were using a particular esoteric symbol to illustrate that, and to illustrate a kind of spiritual message behind that arrangement. This was when I was still a member of the OTO, and sometime after I received that communication, I was sitting in a lodge meeting one night, and some of the more senior brethren were preparing for an initiation. I won't say which degree it was, but they were preparing for an initiation, and they had absent-mindedly left a number of papers on the table with some diagrams which described a secret that was going to be imparted to the initiate. And it was the exact thing that I'd seen in my vision, and this was a grade that was quite far above where I was in the initiatory system. So all of this was vindication, validation, that the communications that I received from the angels during the Gebofal ritual were authentic and to be taken very seriously, and something that, when the time was right, I absolutely had to share with the world. However, as in Dee and Kelly's own communications, there were times where misinformation slipped in from something other than angelic intelligences. There was a task of scouring the revelations afterwards to try and distinguish between true and false revelation. Something which would prove to take many years as I tried to balance that work with all of the other things that I had to do in my life. But of course, it would be remiss of me to not mention the other part of the story in the outside world. So for the final day, the 49th day of the ritual, I wanted to do something really special. I had a friend from the OTO, a brother, and I asked if we could do this 49th call together on the farm that he had access to. So he agreed, and when the time came, I travelled out into regional Western Australia to where the Gebofal ritual would be completed. And I remember as I was leaving the house, packing everything into my car for the long drive ahead, there was a thunderstorm. But even more spooky than that, on the day that the 49th call was to be recited by us, in the town where this brother lived, a huge fire, a huge bushfire was making its way through bushland in the nearby area, and the whole town was on high alert. When I drove into town to this brother's house, I got to his house before he did, and as he pulled into the driveway, he had a water tank with him in the event that he needed to fight some fires. There was a huge grey cloud over the entire area, and there was actually ash falling from the sky because of this nearby bushfire tearing through so much of the land. And it was very eerie indeed that this was happening when so many of the themes of the calls, particularly the 49th call that we were about to read, but also the visions themselves, had to do with fire and even the destruction of the world by fire. We met up with another guy who was going to be joining us, who was from South America and identified as a shaman. The three of us went up to a hilltop overlooking the vast expanse of empty land before us. I anointed everybody with the holy water of Solomon that I had prepared. The ritual was all set up. The others did some rituals to prepare the space, and then I read the 49th call. And then we all scried to receive a vision from that level of the heavens. And I remember having a vision that was of pure fire, just as is described in the call itself. Like the whole heaven was nothing but fire. And then I was given mysteries which again must remain sealed for the time being, but I will publish when the day is right. We finished the ritual off. As we finished, the sun was setting, and because of all of the smoke in the air, as the sun travelled towards the horizon, it was red like the colour of blood. And then we hung out for the rest of the night, and I wrote down the last of the communications, and there was a huge thunderstorm that night. Now that the 49 gates of heaven had been opened, the world definitely felt different. It felt like something had changed. Is there anything else that happened that indicated that the working was a success? Well, receiving communications was not the only thing that the Gebofal ritual was associated with. It was also associated with a particular time in history, which is the beginning of the end times. And once again, I have to say, it certainly feels like the timing of the ritual couldn't have been more appropriate in that respect. You know, it's become something of a meme now, to say that something went terribly wrong around 2015. The people running the simulation or some cosmic force changed something around 2015, and now everything has just gone haywire. So I finished the Gebofal ritual in February of 2015. A few months later, we saw the beginnings of the Conservative campaign in the UK that would lead to Brexit. We saw Donald Trump descending down the golden escalator to announce his presidential campaign. We've seen climate change accelerate in a way that the scientists didn't expect. We've seen war. We've seen a global pandemic in the form of COVID-19. We've seen political polarization, the breakdown of the moral fabric of society as we know it in ways that are quite shocking. And it seems like the forces of spiritual evil feel as though they can openly parade around on the world stage for all to see that they are the powers that run this world. We've seen recessions, we've seen shortages, we've seen all kinds of things happening. It just seems like the whole world is spinning out of control. It gives me no pleasure in saying this because I too have suffered as a result of developments in the world over the past few years, and even if I hadn't, I would feel for the people who have suffered. This was something which was beyond anybody's control. But if this is an Enochian apocalypse working, it's also worth seeing the true meaning of the word apocalypse, which is simply the Greek for a revelation. And indeed, there has been much that has been revealed to me as a result of doing this working, and I have experienced very much an inner apocalypse as a result of doing this working. And this is one aspect of the Gebofal ritual and its effect that I've only just recently started to appreciate. My entire worldview has changed. The influence that the angels had once I made contact with them and once I comprehended the teachings that they gave me has been profound and has completely turned my worldview around. When I began the Gebofal ritual, I was an edgelord. I was a dark, spooky magician. I considered myself a magician of the left-hand path with everything that goes along with that. But in time, largely because of making contact with and being influenced by a number of what I perceive as higher beings, among them the Enochian angels, my worldview has changed. And the first sources that I came across on the Gebofal ritual were not the best sources. And they also, one of the ways that they misinterpreted the ritual was they described it as something that was dark and sinister. And that was part of the appeal to it at the time for me. But as time went on, long after I did the Gebofal ritual, as I educated myself by reading other better research sources, such as Aaron Leach's Angelical Language Volume 1, as well as Jason Louv's John Dee and the Empire of Angels, I learnt what the true effect of the Gebofal ritual really was, and the true implications of me having completed it. And it was quite the opposite of what I had initially thought. And so, inadvertently, by completing this ritual, I'd put myself on a path, I'd set myself on a path where I was part of a plan that was from a much higher place. The plan of the angels to rehabilitate the world, using spiritual knowledge as the means to do that. It's led to my views of monotheistic religion softening, without being overly merciful towards hypocritical religious authority, of course. And in a way, that is also the proof that I need that what I've contacted is really angelic intelligences. You know, there are some people, particularly religious zealots, who would say, oh, you're just talking to demons. You only think that you're contacting angels. But if these were demonic intelligences, then why have they moved me closer to a worldview which is much more in line with traditional monotheism, with traditional Judeo-Christian morality? And why have I warmed up again to the personage of Christ, where before I had a feeling of hostility towards that particular master? All of this is a result of the influence of the Enochian angels. So let that stand on its own 2 feet as a witness and a testimony of the kind of powers that I've been in contact with. And I can't wait to share everything that the angels have taught me, both from this Gebofal ritual as well as with other Enochian workings that I've done to kind of give me an expanded view of the knowledge that I received from the Gebofal ritual. And there's been other communications from my holy guardian angel as well. And a day will come when I can reveal all those things to you. But the day is not yet, unfortunately, and I'm not going to tempt fate revealing too much of that knowledge before it's time, because I've done that before and it's ended badly. But one thing that you can really do to quicken the timeline for me to reveal that knowledge is by helping me to grow this channel. So please hit that subscribe button. If you enjoyed this video, like so that the algorithm recognizes it. Leave your comments down below if you have any. And when this channel, when my other platforms reach a critical mass, many things will be revealed. But there's many more things for me to talk about before that day comes on this channel. So stick around, and thanks for listening this time, and I'll see you for my next video.